Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Tyler, and today we're diving into CSP EA PayGo, the Straight Talk Purchasing Clinic. So whether you're an IT pro, a business leader, or just someone who wants to get more of their Microsoft investment, you're in the right place. Here's what we'll be decoding during this webinar. Decoding different models, ownership, commitments, and price protection explained for each type, scalability and exit strategies, how to grow and pivot if necessary, support and day-to-day operations, who owns what after the contract is signed, and then finally, some real scenarios, ultimately, which is right for me, CSP, EA, or PayGo. The first section, decoding the models, ownership, commitments, and price protection explained. First, let's check out PayGo. Pay-as-you-go is fundamentally the most straightforward purchasing model Microsoft offers, and in many ways, it's the most familiar, as it feels like most purchases in life. At its core, pay-go is exactly what it sounds like. You consume services and licenses and pay for what you actually use when you use it. There are no long-term contractual commitments, no upfront spend requirements, and no multi-year forecasting exercise required to get started. The biggest differentiator with PayGo compared to EA or even CSP is flexibility. Again, there's no 3-year agreement, no committed value, and no obligation to maintain a certain level of spend. If your environment grows, your bill grows. If it shrinks, your bill shrinks. And that kind of elasticity makes PayGo especially attractive for organizations that are evolving quickly or simply don't want to lock themselves into a fixed model. From an ownership standpoint, PayGo is simple. The subscription lives directly with Microsoft, and the billing is usage-based. So you're not negotiating an enterprise contract or managing enrollment structures. There's very little administrative overhead compared to an EA. So you provision resources, assign licenses, and Microsoft invoices you based on actual consumption. That simplicity, however, does come with trade-offs as well. With PayGo, there's no price protection. You're exposed to list pricing and future price changes as they happen. So if Microsoft adjusts pricing for Azure services or Microsoft 365 SKUs, those changes flow through to you, the end customer, immediately. For organizations that value predictability and long-term cost certainty, this can feel uncomfortable, especially for workloads or licenses that are business critical and always on. Another key consideration is cost management. PayGo puts the responsibility squarely on you, the customer, to actively monitor and govern usage. Because there's no committed spend and no built-in guardrails, it's easy for costs to drift upward over time because Azure resources can be spun up quickly, test environments can linger, and licenses can remain assigned longer than necessary. Without strong visibility and disciplined review, PayGo environments can become inefficient and expensive without anyone noticing right away. Also, the day-to-day operations under PayGo tend to require a different kind of maturity than EA. You don't need licensing specialists or contract managers, but you do need good operational hygiene. What I mean by that is it's essential to have systems built around cost monitoring, budget alerts, Azure tagging strategies, and regular reviews of license assignments. In many ways, PayGo rewards organizations that are hands-on and attentive, but on the flip side can punish those that are not. What about an enterprise agreement or an EA? The biggest difference with an enterprise agreement or EA when comparing it to both PayGo and CSP is that you're signing up for a multi-year commitment. When people hear EA, the first thing that usually comes to mind are scale and commitment. The biggest differentiator with an enterprise agreement is that you're entering a multi-year contractual relationship with Microsoft. And in most cases, that means a 3-year agreement where you're making a forward-looking financial commitment to licensing and in some cases, cloud consumption. From a planning perspective, that commitment can be incredibly appealing because an EA is really designed around delivering predictability to a customer. This means that you know what your pricing is going to look like over the entire term of the agreement, you know when true-ups happen, and you have a relatively stable framework for budgeting. For organizations that value consistency and long-term planning, price protection is one of the biggest advantages of the EA model. Once pricing is locked in, you're insulated from year-over-year increases during the term, which can be comforting for your finance and accounting teams. This predictability, however, does come with some trade-offs too. The first being that given the multi-year commitment, an EA is far less flexible than CSP or pay-as-you-go. When committing to a 3-year agreement, you're effectively betting that your organization's size, licensing need, and cloud strategy over the next 36 months will align closely with what you forecast on day one. If your needs change, maybe you downsize, restructure, divest part of your business, or shift technology strategies, The EA doesn't automatically adjust with you. And one of the most, if not most important concepts to understand with an EA is the idea of committed spend. Not only are you just agreeing to participate in the program, but also to hit a certain financial threshold over the life of the agreement. If you fall short of that commitment, you don't get a refund or a rollover. You still owe the committed value, which means unused licenses or unrealized cloud value can end up being left on the table. It's how the agreement is structured, and it's something organizations need to go into well aware of with a strategy to avoid significant losses. Ownership is another key difference. With an EA, the customer owns the agreement directly with Microsoft. While partners can help transact, support, and advise, the relationship and contractual responsibility ultimately sit with you and your organization. That means there's more administrative overhead, and therefore you're managing enrollments, annual true-ups, license counts, compliance, and reporting. Day-to-day operations under an EA tend to require a stronger internal process than CSP or PAYGO, where many of those responsibilities are handled by another party. And what about CSP? So how is CSP different from the other options out there, and how do I know if it's right for me? Well, put simply, CSP is the happy medium that sits right in the sweet spot of PAYGO and EA. Here are some of the things that set CSP apart from EA and PAYGO. CSP offers flexible license terms, monthly or annual. CSP needs no big upfront commitments, so pay for only what you use. And you and your team work directly with a CSP partner. Your partner is there to work with you and provide technical and billing support, as well as ongoing guidance in Azure Cloud and M365. Here are some thoughts you might have that lead you to working with a CSP rather than an EA or PAYGO agreement. You could be having a discussion with your IT team, your finance team, or the C-suite thinking, does a monthly usage-based consumption model fit better with our business cash flow requirements than a multi-year financial commitment would? When you hit roadblocks or technical issues, you might ask yourself, is Microsoft technical support alone able to handle my specific needs and or fill in the gaps in areas where we don't have expertise? Or when I work with Microsoft, do they resolve my issues in a sufficient and timely manner? You may experience seasonality and think, do I have seasonal employees, whether summer, holidays, or the busy season, where my licensing requires more flexibility than I'm afforded now? Or do I have the time and bandwidth to monitor and act upon it when changes do arise? And finally, do the Azure native cost management tools like the cost management portal do enough for me to provide effective FinOps management, communicate costs, or to plan for future spend with different departments of my org? If any of these thoughts are crossing your mind as you pay your Azure bill, open a technical ticket, onboard your seasonal staff, or try to understand and communicate a component of your invoice, it might be time to give a CSP a call and start to learn whether or not it's the right fit for you. Next is scalability and pivoting. Growth within each and when to consider a pivot. Scaling is where PAYGO can really shine if monitored and controlled well. It scales instantly in both directions. You can onboard new users, launch new workloads, or experiment with new services without renegotiating agreements or worrying about thresholds. Just as importantly, you can scale back just as easily. If a project ends or a team size changes, you can stop paying for what you're no longer using. That level of responsiveness is something an EA simply isn't designed to provide. Exiting or transitioning from PAYGO is also straightforward. Because there's no long-term contract, you're not waiting for a renewal window to make changes. Organizations often start in PAYGO and later move into CSP or an EA once usage stabilizes and predictability becomes more valuable than flexibility. In that sense, PAYGO is often a starting point rather than a destination. Again, the most important factor when considering PAYGO as a viable option for you and your organization is an honest analysis of your operational hygiene around Microsoft Azure and M365 licensing, your bandwidth to monitor and make changes should you need to, and of course the expertise of your team to navigate the complex Microsoft landscape on your own. Scaling under an EA is a little bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it scales up very well for growth if you're adding users, expanding workloads, or standardizing across the organization. In this way, an EA can be extremely efficient and straightforward. On the other hand, scaling down is not nearly as simple. Reducing license counts or shifting away from certain products often can't happen until renewal, which can leave organizations paying for capacity they no longer need. Some recent changes in Microsoft's licensing landscape have made this even more important to evaluate. With the removal of traditional tiered pricing for licenses, Many EA customers, especially mid-market organizations, are seeing meaningful cost increases for Microsoft 365 if they haven't already. The historical assumption that EA equals better pricing is no longer universally true, and that new paradigm is leading organizations to reassess whether the value they're getting aligns with the commitment they're making. Another common question we see from people on the fence about an EA is, can you exit an EA if it's no longer the right fit? Well, the short answer is yes, but typically not until the end of the term. An EA is not designed for midstream pivots. You can transition to a CSP or pay as you go at renewal, but that decision needs to be planned well in advance. So this makes the upfront decision especially important because you're largely living with that choice for the next 3 years. And CSP scalability. CSP scales very well due to the combination of both flexibility and hands-on partnership and guidance from your partner. Think of a CSP or cloud solution provider as your personal guide through the Microsoft Cloud. The Microsoft ecosystem and landscape is vast and complex. Instead of wandering through it on your own with a map and a flashlight, hoping you're on the right path and that you don't get lost, you have a partner like Cortec walking right beside you, helping you create a plan, pick the best path forward, avoiding pitfalls, navigating sudden and unexpected changes, and even helping spot a shortcut or two to hopefully save you time, money, or both. With CSP, you're not locked into a 3-year contract like with an EA, and one of the best things about CSP is that it provides you with flexibility. For example, think of M365 licensing. Again, you may have seasonal employees, or you could just have an increase or decrease in headcount due to the normal course of business. Well, with a CSP agreement, you can leverage annual or monthly billing so that if you need to make adjustments to your licensing mix, you can scale up or down as your business needs change. With a CSP, you're not stuck with licenses you no longer need. And Azure is quite similar. With Azure Spend, you don't have to commit to a number that you expect to hit over the next 3 years, but instead you only pay for what you use while consistently trying to optimize your resources and consumption cost. But here's the kicker. It's not just about buying licenses and it's not just about paying for what you use. The real value is in having someone in your corner and helping you navigate the Microsoft ecosystem inside now. There's so many changes that Microsoft makes to its platforms and technologies almost every single day that it would be nearly impossible for one person to keep up with it all. But if you chose to work with Cortex or CSP, our whole team is behind you at all times with every step you take. With a wide array of expertise in all things Microsoft, we're committed to helping you optimize costs, troubleshoot issues, and make sure you're getting value from your investment. Proactive guidance and ongoing support are essential for avoiding pitfalls and errant out-of-control costs. And yes, you can still access Microsoft and leverage Microsoft support, but with Cortec as your CSP, you've got a team that can escalate issues, advocate on your behalf, and ultimately keep things moving so you're not just a ticket number sitting in a queue. In support and day-to-day operation, who owns what after the contract is signed, and what does support look like for each of these options? So what does it look like for PayGo? Pay-as-you-go support works a bit differently and starts out much lighter by default. With PayGo, every customer begins with basic incident support. That covers billing questions, subscription management, self-service documentation, Microsoft Learn resources, and community support. What it does not include is guaranteed technical response times or hands-on assistance when something breaks. If you're running real workloads in Azure under PayGo, you'll almost certainly want to layer on additional support. Microsoft offers a range of Azure support plans that PayGo customers can purchase directly. These plans are billed monthly and are focused specifically on Azure, not the full Microsoft stack. As you move up those plans, you gain faster response times, 24/7 access to support engineers, and escalation paths for higher severity incidents. For organizations with business-critical Azure workloads, these plans are often essential, but it's important to understand that they cover Azure only. They don't provide the same breadth of coverage for Microsoft 365 or other platforms. Just like EA customers, pay organizations have the option to purchase Microsoft Unified support if they want enterprise-wide coverage across Azure and M365. Unified support is not exclusive to EA customers. It's available to any organization with sufficient Microsoft spend. The same pricing model here applies here as well, where support costs are scaled based on overall consumption rather than actual ticket usage. The practical reality with pay-as-you-go is this. Support starts minimal, and it's entirely up to the organization to decide how much coverage to add. Some teams are comfortable operating that way because they have strong internal expertise and governance, while others quickly realize that while PayGo is flexible from a purchasing standpoint, it can feel isolating when something goes wrong and there's no partner or support structure already in place. What about an EA? Well, support in the context of an enterprise agreement can often be misunderstood. One of the common assumptions we hear is that enterprise-grade support is automatically included when you sign an EA, and that's not actually the case. With an EA, licensing and support are two separate decisions. The agreement gives you access to Microsoft's products and pricing structure, but it does not, by default, give you high-touch technical support. Every EA customer has access to support out of the gate, basic support. Things like billing and subscription assistance, Microsoft documentation, learn content, community forums, and service health dashboards. But that's all table stakes. It's important to understand that this level of support does not include guaranteed response time for outages or deep technical break fix help. If an EA customer wants enterprise level technical support, the primary option is again Microsoft Unified Support. Unified Support is a separate contract that's purchased directly from Microsoft and is designed to cover Azure, M365, and other Microsoft workloads across the organization. It includes 24/7 reactive support, defined severity-based response times, escalation management, and access to Microsoft Services Hub. The most unique thing about Microsoft Unified Support is its pricing model. Instead of paying for support based on how much you actually use it, pricing is calculated as a percentage of your overall Microsoft spend, including Azure consumption and licensing. That means as your Microsoft footprint grows, your support costs grow alongside it, whether your support usage increases at the same rate or not. For some organizations, especially very large organizations with mature IT operations, that model can make sense. For others, it can feel disconnected from day-to-day reality, particularly if support tickets are infrequent or highly specialized. It's also worth noting that unified support is optional. EA customers are not required to purchase it. Some organizations choose to rely entirely on an internal expertise, third-party support providers, or some combination of both. The key takeaway is this. With an EA, support is a strategic choice, not something that's inherently bundled into the agreement. And finally, what does support and governance look like with a CSP? Well, speaking from my perspective, with Cortex CSP, you have access to a 24/7 incident support team for Azure and Microsoft 365, a transparent escalation process, access to Microsoft Premier support, and access to governance tools through our Insights platform to help keep costs under control and monitor ticket statuses and updates. Our process to resolve your technical issues is simple and effective. We triage your ticket, we move it through our engineering teams with expertise in specific areas related to the issues at hand, and finally, if needed, escalate to Microsoft Premier support, where we have a dedicated Microsoft Relationship Manager on our team who continuously monitors your ticket and advocates on your behalf. The outcome of this process we've designed is that you, our client, gets quicker results even when a ticket is with Microsoft support, ultimately ensuring a timely and satisfactory resolution. We're here to be a long-term partner in helping you get the most out of your Microsoft investment by providing proper support unique to your needs is one of those ways that we do that. And finally, when does each agreement win and which is right for you? First, let's look at PayGo. PayGo is typically a strong fit for smaller organizations, startups, or teams with highly variable workloads. It's also well suited for companies going through change, whether M&A, divestitures, rapid growth, or modernization efforts, where locking in a 3-year forecast simply isn't realistic. The PayGo option is ideal for organizations that want to experiment, move quickly, and retain full control without contractual friction. On the flip side, PayGo may be less appealing for large, stable enterprises with consistent licensing needs and mature procurement processes. Over time, paying list price with no discounts or price protection can become expensive, especially at scale. In those scenarios, organizations often start looking for ways to trade some flexibility for better cost efficiency. And that ultimately brings us to the central question around PayGo. Are you willing to trade long-term pricing predictability for short-term flexibility? For some organizations, that trade-off makes perfect sense, and for others, it introduces too much uncertainty. PayGo isn't inherently better or worse than EA or CSP. It's simply optimized for a different set of priorities. Understanding those priorities and being honest about your organization's ability to actively monitor and manage your Microsoft products and services is what ultimately determines whether pay-as-you-go is a smart fit. Now, what about an EA? Generally, enterprise agreements tend to work best for larger organizations with stable or growing headcount, predictable licensing needs, and a mature IT and procurement function. These companies have dedicated teams who understand Microsoft licensing, actively manage consumption, regularly audit usage to ensure value is being realized, and they're organizations where long-term price protection outweighs the need for flexibility. If you're a smaller or mid-sized organization, or if your environment is changing rapidly, whether due to contraction, M&A, or evolving cloud strategies, an EA can quickly feel restrictive. In those cases, the operational simplicity and flexibility of CSP or pay-as-you-go often align better with reality. And that brings us to the big question around choosing an EA. In today's IT landscape, with constant innovation, shifting product models, and evolving business needs, is it reasonable to expect that an organization, even with a strong finance and IT team, can perfectly forecast its Microsoft spend 36 months into the future? For some organizations, the answer is yes. For many others, it's a much harder call. And that's exactly why understanding both the strengths and limitations of an EA is so critical before committing to one. And finally, with CSP, a partner isn't just there to buy your licenses and hold your Azure subscriptions. CSPs unlock real value for you and your business. So quickly here, I'd like to highlight a few quick wins around real customer stories from CoreTech. The first is about how we worked with a customer who had been watching their Azure costs climb for months, but couldn't figure out why. They lacked the visibility they needed to properly diagnose the issue, and even if they they told us that they probably still wouldn't have been able to tame the cost due to technical gaps in their team. So they came to CoreTech and asked for help. Our CSP team ran cost optimization workshops, identified unused resources, and shifted workloads to reserved instances, and then met regularly to monitor costs. The result, their monthly Azure spend dropped by 18%, freeing up budget for new projects, growth, and innovation. Or take another customer in need of some serious licensing consolidation. This organization had licenses scattered across multiple CSP agreements, no governance around procurement, and even a credit card number floating around for purchases whenever requested. This was making renewals and their monthly bill a nightmare. The licensing ship was actively sinking and taking on more and more water every single day. Again, the CSP team here at CoreTech helped them consolidate everything under one CSP. Then we streamlined their renewals and aligned their licensing with actual usage rather than just quoting them at their existing quantities. The outcome, simpler management and a 12% reduction in annual licensing costs. All in, that's the kind of impact that we aim for, real and measurable value. We've worked with enough clients to know that impact is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Having a deep bench of expertise and a unified team, all working towards your best interests, comes into play every single day. So if you're interested in a CSP, what we do is we create real change for organizations that work with us. And in closing, I wanted to say thank you for spending your time with me today to better understand the different models that are available to you as a Microsoft customer. The biggest takeaway I want to leave you with is this. There isn't one best option that is universally better than others. Like most things in life, there are always trade-offs. What works best for you may not work best for the person next door. And even if it works best for you now, it may not be what works best for you in the future. Ultimately, each model is optimized for a different type of organization, a different level of predictability, a different appetite for flexibility, commitment, and overall operational ownership. My goal with this session was simple. I wanted to give you, the listener, a clear and practical framework so you can ask better questions, have more informed conversations with Microsoft or your partners, and ultimately make a purchasing decision that aligns with how your organization actually operates. Again, thank you for your time and have a great day.